Welcome back, everybody, for another deep dive.
Yeah.
This time, we're going to be looking at faith and imagination. And we're going to be using a lecture by Neville Goddard called Holding to Our Faith.
Okay.
It was delivered on May 9th, 1969.
All right.
So a little ways back. But as you'll see,
Okay.
the ideas are still shockingly relevant today.
Interesting.
And he starts off with kind of a bang, really gets you thinking right away.
Oh, how so?
Well, he talks about this news story.
Okay.
About the Vatican declaring 40 saints non-existent.
Oh, wow.
Including Saint Christopher.
Like completely non-existent?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he talks about, imagine if you were a family.
Right.
And you always had Saint Christopher medals.
Right, for safe travel.
For safe travels.
Yeah.
And now suddenly...
Now they don't exist.
The Vatican's saying, nope, sorry.
Interesting.
And he kind of uses that as a springboard to say,
okay,
why are we putting our faith
right.
in these external authorities?
Oh, I see.
So he's really challenging the idea of relying on saints or rituals for our spiritual connection.
Interesting. So where do we go instead then?
That's where the imagination comes in.
Ah.
So instead of looking outward to saints for guidance, he says we should look inward.
Okay.
And he makes this pretty radical claim.
Okay.
He says, and I quote, "The only Christ that ever existed is your own wonderful human imagination."
Wow. That's a pretty powerful statement.
Yeah, it kind of turns traditional religious ideas on their head.
It definitely does. So he's suggesting that the power we often attribute to these external figures actually lies within us.
Exactly.
In our own imagination.
Yeah, and he really emphasizes that.
Okay.
That imagination is the ultimate creative force within each person.
Okay.
He argues that everything in the world, both good and bad,
everything,
stems from this power of human imagination.
So are we responsible for the bad things too then?
Well, that's a complex question.
Yeah.
And he does address it.
Okay.
And he talks a lot about fear.
Yeah.
And how fear is often used as a tool for control by external forces. So, tyrants and things like that.
Right. They try to instill fear in order to manipulate people.
Exactly.
Interesting.
So he's really urging us to find that inner strength.
I see.
That courage to break free from those external influences.
So it's about recognizing that we have this power within.
Yeah.
And not giving it away to these external authorities.
Exactly.
Or succumbing to fear.
Exactly. I mean, it's a very empowering message.
It is.
But I'm still kind of wrapping my head around this.
Yeah.
This idea that our imagination is the source of everything. How does that even work?
It's a good question. And he uses this analogy of a radio or a TV.
Oh, okay.
So just like we can tune a radio to different frequencies to access different stations, right? He's suggesting that we can kind of tune our imagination
Interesting.
to different frequencies and manifest different outcomes in our lives.
So it's about what, like focusing our thoughts and beliefs in a way that shapes our reality?
Exactly.
But then wouldn't that mean people are consciously imagining bad things?
Well, that's where the fear piece comes back in.
Okay.
He's suggesting that fear often distorts our imagination, leading us to focus on these, negative possibilities instead of the positive outcomes.
Okay, so if we can kind of overcome that fear and learn to focus our imagination in a positive direction, we can change our experiences.
Exactly. It's not just about daydreaming.
Right.
It's about actively using our imagination as a tool
to shape our reality.
Yeah.
Wow, this is already making me think about faith in a whole new way.
It's powerful stuff.
So what else does Goddard say about this whole journey of self-discovery?
Well, he talks about the journey to the Father and how it's really about uniting with Christ.
Okay.
Which he sees as a symbol of the awakened imagination within each of us. And he uses a lot of biblical references to support this.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Could you give me an example?
Yeah, so one that he refers to often is this idea of finding David.
Okay.
And he connects that to the decree, "Thou art my son, today I have begotten thee."
Okay.
So he's suggesting that the Son of God is not some external figure, but rather something that we discover within ourselves.
Through the power of imagination.
Exactly.
So it's not about worshiping an external deity. It's about recognizing the divine power within ourselves.
Exactly.
And that's where his challenge to actively live by faith, rather than just passively accepting it, really comes into play.
I see.
He's really emphasizing that true faith lies in recognizing and harnessing this inner power.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And then he tells this kind of curious story about a woman and a fish to illustrate this point.
I remember that one.
What's that all about?
Well, he describes this woman walking down the street carrying a fish.
Okay.
And the fish keeps almost dying.
Okay.
And she keeps having to revive it.
Okay.
And she finally realizes that she's been neglecting this fish, which he says represents her own imagination.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
So the fish is like something that's supposed to save her?
Right.
But the true savior is her own creative power.
Exactly.
That's a powerful message.
Yeah.
But how do we actually put this into practice?
That's the big question, right?
Yeah.
Well, he uses another really fascinating analogy to explain that.
Okay.
And it involves a dream about a pig.
A pig dream?
Yeah.
Okay, now I'm really intrigued.
All right, I'll tell you about it. So in this dream, he finds this runt of a pig.
Okay.
And he tries to make it comfortable.
Okay.
You know, give it a nice place to lie down.
Oh.
And later, he sees the pig is grown, but it's really thin and weak.
Oh.
Like it hasn't been fed properly.
Oh, I see.
And then he sees his brother come in.
Okay.
And his brother adds this rich, creamy gravy to the pig's food.
Interesting.
And that's when he realizes that he's been neglecting this pig.
Okay.
Which represents his imagination.
So the pig represents imagination.
Yeah.
And the gravy represents what? The things we need to feed it.
Exactly.
Like what kind of food are we talking about here?
It's our thoughts, our beliefs, our feelings.
Okay.
He's saying that if we constantly feed our imagination with negativity, doubt, fear, it's going to remain weak and underdeveloped. But if we nourish it with positive thoughts, faith, a belief in our own power, it can grow and thrive.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
But there's also a candle in this dream, right?
Yes.
The candle.
What's the significance of that?
So this candle suddenly bursts into flames.
Okay.
And he describes it as the spirit of man being ignited.
And he sees it as a symbol of his own imagination awakening.
So it's like a spark of inspiration or something.
Exactly.
Oh, okay.
But he also realizes that even though he understood the importance of imagination, he hadn't been actively cultivating it.
Like he wasn't walking the walk.
Exactly. He'd been neglecting his pig. And that's why he stresses the importance of practice when it comes to imagination.
So it's not just a passive thing.
No.
It's an active process.
Exactly.
That requires effort and consistency.
Yeah.
So how do we actually practice imagination?
Right. What does that look like?
Yeah, in everyday life.
Well, remember that analogy of tuning the imagination like a radio? He suggests we can use a similar process to manifest our desires.
Okay.
So he encourages us to create a vivid mental picture of our desired outcome.
Okay.
Engaging all of our senses.
So it's not just seeing it. It's like, what would we hear?
Yeah.
Feel, smell, even taste. If our wish were already fulfilled.
You got it.
So it's like creating a mini movie in our minds. Yeah. Bringing it to life with as much detail as possible.
Exactly.
Okay.
And he also suggests imagining hearing the voice of a trusted friend.
Oh, interesting.
Congratulating us on our success.
Okay.
Really feeling those emotions.
Okay.
Associated with achieving that goal.
So it's not just about visualizing the outcome.
Right.
It's about embodying the feeling of it already being real.
Exactly. And that's where faith comes in.
Okay.
It's about trusting in the power of our own imagination.
Right.
To bring about that desired change, even if we can't see it in the physical world yet.
And that reminds me of something he said about planting a seed.
Yes.
He cautions against expecting instant results.
Right.
He compares each act of imagination to planting a seed.
Exactly.
And just as different seeds have different gestation periods, some desires might take longer to manifest than others.
Exactly. Patience and persistence are key.
So we need to be patient, but also persistent.
Yeah.
We can't just imagine something once and then expect it to magically appear.
You got it.
We have to keep nurturing that seed, keep feeding our imagination with that vision.
Exactly.
And we also need to remember what he said about abolishing fear.
Yes, that's so important.
Because fear can be a major obstacle to realizing our desires.
Absolutely.
We get caught up in the how instead of focusing on the what. It's like we get bogged down by all the perceived obstacles and limitations instead of just assuming the desired outcome is already on its way.
That's it, exactly.
So he's encouraging us to shift our focus from the how to the feeling of the wish fulfilled.
Yeah.
He's suggesting that the how will often take care of itself.
It often does.
If we can truly believe in the reality of our imaginal experience,
right.
It's about learning to bypass the logical mind and tap into that deeper creative power within us.
That's the key.
His ideas are so radical.
They are.
Yet they make a strange kind of sense.
I know. It's like he's taking traditional religious concepts and turning them inside out.
Exactly.
Yeah. It really is a mind-blowing concept.
It is.
It makes you wonder what we could achieve if we fully embrace this idea of imagination as a creative force.
And he actually poses that question in the lecture.
Oh, does he?
Yeah, he asks,
right.
What if we consistently walked in the assumption that our wish is fulfilled?
Okay.
What would we experience in our world?
It's a pretty loaded question.
It is.
Is he talking about manifesting a parking space or something more significant?
Right.
Like world peace?
Yeah.
Where does he draw the line?
He doesn't really set limits on the potential of imagination. He suggests that everything we see in the world, from the smallest details to the grandest achievements, is ultimately a result of someone's imaginal activity. So, if we want to see positive change in the world, it all starts with changing our inner inner state.
In a way.
That's a big responsibility.
It is, and it's not about wishful thinking.
Right.
Or passive daydreaming.
All right.
It's about consciously cultivating our imagination. Using it as a tool to shape not just our own lives, but potentially the world around us.
Yeah, this whole conversation just keeps bringing me back to that analogy of feeding the pig.
Right.
We have to nourish our imagination, give it the right kind of food if we want it to flourish.
Absolutely. And that nourishment comes from our beliefs, our thoughts, our feelings.
Okay.
If we're constantly feeding our imagination with fear, doubt, limitation, we're likely to manifest more of those experiences in our lives.
Okay.
But if we choose to focus on faith, love, possibility, that's when things start to get really interesting.
This whole deep dive has been so thought-provoking. It's given me a whole new way of looking at faith, creativity, the power we have to shape our reality.
I think that's exactly what Goddard would have wanted.
Yeah.
He was a master at sparking that curiosity, inviting people to step into their own power. Before we wrap up, is there like one key takeaway that stands out to you from this deep dive?
I think for me, it's the sheer audacity of his claim that our imagination is the ultimate creative force.
Right.
It's both empowering and a bit daunting, isn't it?
It is.
It suggests that we have a far greater responsibility for the state of our world and our own lives than we might realize.
Yeah, it definitely leaves you with a lot to ponder.
It does.
And I think it speaks to the power of this idea.
Yeah.
How it can challenge our existing beliefs and open up these new possibilities.
Absolutely. So as you go about your day, I encourage you to consider this.
Okay.
What if your imagination is far more powerful
than you ever realized? And what might you create if you dared to believe in its infinite potential?
That's a fantastic question to leave our listeners with.
I hope so.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Into the world of Neville Goddard.
Absolutely.
Until next time, keep exploring, keep imagining, and keep believing in the power within you.
I like it.